Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo this week, starting September 20th. Wow. Yes, we are moving along and we're getting through the book of James. We're actually midway through this New Testament book. And I did put up a poll today so people could chime in on where we go next. We might do the book of John, or we might start the Bible and just go to Genesis and maybe roll through that big book and do some devotions kind of throughout the book. So we can do that as well. So I thought those might be some good choices. So if you want to chime in, you certainly can just by clicking the poll there, and we'll see where we go next. So that'll be fun. So James chapter 3 is where we're going to be today. Very popular passage, actually. A lot of Christians know this passage because it's one that kind of many fiery sermons have been kind of taught on. And if you do miss any of these, you could always go to the YouTube channel with my name, Bo Willette, and you could find the archives of all of the Devos there. So, chapter 3. Dear brothers and sisters, not many of you should become teachers in the church. For we who teach will be judged more strictly. And it says, indeed, we all make many mistakes, or we all stumble in many ways. And if we could control our tongues, we would be perfect and also be able to control ourselves in every other way. So James starts us off by letting us know that not many of us should become teachers in the church, be judged more strictly. Um, I was listening to Pastor Scott the other day talk on this passage, and in his archive messages on his website, on the website, CalvaryChristianFellowship.com. And Scott kind of relayed this to being judged more strictly by people. That people, sometimes when you put yourself out, and you might have noticed this in your life, you put yourself out and you might get hit down. And that might have happened to you. Maybe you stepped out in your family before and you shared something, and you kind of were, and then because you stood out, you kind of got reprimanded or something like that. And that's the idea that Pastor Scott was kind of getting through, is that whenever you share something, whenever you use your tongue, there's always opportunity for someone to listen to what you said and be mad about it. The only way not to ever, I guess, get blasted is to never ever share, never ever say anything, right? Um, so some people don't. Some people just kind of don't share nothing because they don't want to face any kind of judgment from other people. And no matter how, sometimes what's in your heart, like it can be that you have the greatest heart in the world and you mean so well and you're wanting to say and do the right things, and but someone is offended by what you said. Sometimes that happens. Um, and sometimes when we're just sharing the Bible, we can just be sharing what Jesus taught. That can be very offensive to people, and people get mad. And it's not that we said it per se. We didn't make it up, but we're just sharing what Jesus said, and people could get very mad and judge us more strictly. Um, and it says, all of us make many mistakes. And I love verse 2, don't you? We all make many mistakes. Very true, right? You could pick apart all of our lives and find areas that we make mistakes in. And it's good this morning to remember that we all do make mistakes. And if we can approach the day with that kind of mindset, then we might be very slow to judge other people. We might be more quick to listen, as James told us to be. We might not be so off the handle quick, to judge when we realize that, man, we all make mistakes. We all are people that have, said something that we shouldn't have said, done something we shouldn't have done. And James talks about now the tongue, and he talks about it being something that if we could just control this thing, boy, maybe we can control, it says, ourselves in every other way. Um, and I think James is getting at that idea that the tongue is so small, but we can't even control that. That's very difficult for us. Um, James is always kind of revealing our inabilities, our failures, and showing us just how difficult it is to be saved by works. If we were to somehow be able to get into heaven by our good works, then James is saying, boy, this is going to be tough because we all stumble in many ways. If you want to see your failures, just become a teacher, and you'll find, especially from others, where you have missed the mark. And so he goes on and he says, we can make a large horse go wherever we want by means of a small bit in its mouth. Now, I don't know anything about horses. I'm really not a horse person. And I kind of feel bad sometimes for saying that because I know people love horses. But, they put a small bit in its mouth, and I realize that, and they can turn that big horse, every which way. There was a movie that was on the other day, Sylvia was watching, and it had a person who was doing barrel racing. And I was kind of enamored a little bit by how those turns were so sharp with the horse, and how they kind of got low. It kind of really went into the turn, and how they were able to turn that horse so well. And so I kind of understand this passage a little more just by watching that just the other day. And it says, and a small rudder makes a huge ship turn wherever the pilot chooses to go, even though the winds are strong. I'm not a big sailor either, but I have been on a sailboat, and I have navigated it just, with a captain there, of course. But it's so amazing. You got this little small, thing in your hand, and it's turning this rudder, and the big, sailing boat is actually moving every which way. It's very cool. And so in the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches. But a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And among all the body parts, the tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness, corrupting your entire body. Wow. It says it can set your whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself. The tongue can really get us in trouble, it seems like James is getting at. And we all make mistakes in many ways. And if only we could control this tongue, right, then maybe we could, handle the whole body. But man, just trying to take one part of your life and saying, hey, can I control one part of my life? And that is just this tongue, one of my members. Paul the Apostle uses the term members to talk about body parts. And so can I just control my tongue? How am I doing with that today? So he says, people can tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It is restless and evil, full of deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those who have been made in the image of God. Isn't that interesting how our tongue is like that? And God, may this morning we be very conscious of our tongue and how it can be such a small member of our body that damages so many things, so many people. And help us to just be able to understand that. But it's true how we can praise God on one day, and then we can curse people the next day, and that's easy for us to do. Sometimes we might have an enemy that the enemy that is of the nation of where you live, the country you're part of, and the country has an enemy. And you can praise God in the morning and pray for your enemies, and then you could be cursing your enemies, in the car, while you're driving, listening to a podcast on political things, and next thing you know, with your mouth, you're cursing them, and that happens so many times. And he's saying this isn't how it ought to be, but this is how the reality is. And he says, and so blessing and cursing come from pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. Does a spring water of bubble out with both fresh water and bitter water? Does a fig tree produce olives or a grapevine produce figs? He says, no, and you can't draw fresh water from a salty spring. So he talks about our lives kind of being, like a fresh water. And that, if in a sense, we're fresh water, can we really produce bitter water from us? And if we are a fig tree, can we produce something like an olive? And if we are a grapevine, can we really produce figs? Like, what does it really show about us, our nature? What does it really show about who we are, and whose we are? What is our tongue telling us? What kind of tree are we? What are we? I think that's what James is getting at. What does your tongue say about you? And that's a really cool time of Devo, to God is, hey, what is my voice like? If someone was recording everything that I said in a day, what would they find out? And, and that's what Paul gets at. You know what they'd find? You'd probably be under a lot of judgment for things, right? Yeah, because our tongue is set on fire, right, by hell. It's small, but it can produce a fire, a big one. So true wisdom. He says, if you are wise in understanding God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works by the humility that comes from wisdom. So if we say that we are wise people, then we're going to produce wisdom. Wisdom is going to have its fruit. It's going to have its producing in us. So if we say we're people of God, then it's going to produce something in us. If we say we are again an olive tree, or if we say we're a grapevine, are we producing something different? So if we are wise and understanding God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works from the humility that comes from wisdom. And I love this, the humility that comes from wisdom. And, another thing I could really kind of hone in on in the morning Devo is that the more wisdom we gain from God's word, the more humility should follow. Because we know that the tongue is such a uncontrollable thing, and that we need God's help to control this. And we need God's wisdom and strength and encouragement and all that. Because we know we're such fragile people, it should make us more humble, not more prideful. And the more we study the Bible, the more we realize just how far away from a perfect God we really are, and how much we really need salvation, and what a joy and a blessing Jesus is for saving us. And that doesn't produce a pride in us, but it produces a humility that comes from wisdom. So the more you're growing in Jesus Christ, do you find that the more humble you're becoming? Or do you find you're becoming more proud the more you're growing with Jesus? And I love that. Good works, how does good works show itself? From the humility that comes from wisdom. So I love that, a humility that comes from wisdom. And hopefully these devotions are ones where we could really, hone in on stuff where we can, again, look to God and be like, God, there's things I really need help on. And it's producing a humility that comes from wisdom as we grow through reading the Word together. It says, but if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, oh, that selfish ambition, right? That bitter jealousy, right? That creeps up, that makes us say things, right? That selfish ambition in our heart that comes out through our mouth too. It says, don't cover up truth with boasting and lying. So it's talking about this wisdom from below, right? These bitter jealousies that happen in our lives, selfish ambitions, things that are in us, things that are in here, that really create all kinds of issues within us as human beings, man. Look at other people, we get bitter, we get jealous, we have selfish ambition, right? And we cover it up with what? Our boasting and our lying by saying that we're doing great, or whatever it is that we're saying, but we cover it up by some kind of mask, you know. Instead of the humility that comes from wisdom. The more I'm growing in God, the more I can admit my failures. Hey, I am a failure at this. I don't do good at this. I struggle with that. There's a humility that comes from wisdom. I realize that we all stumble in many ways, as James just got done saying at the very top of the chapter. We all make many mistakes. There can be a wisdom. The more I grow in that God's wisdom, the more again I'm able to share. I'm not the truth. I don't have to lie. I don't have to boast. I'm not covering up stuff. It says, "For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom." These things that get in us, really, what moves you in your life? Do you have jealousies? Do you have these selfish ambitions going on? Yeah, we all do. We all need to look at that and go, yeah, there is things like that going on. It says such things are earthly, animalistic kind of thing. James is saying that the idea of earthly is the idea of there's a spiritual that the Bible talks about, and then there's like an animalistic, earthy, carnal. That's a really cool biblical word, carnal, and those are always like contrasted, to be spiritually minded or to be carnally minded. And here James uses we get this word earthy, and I don't mean good earthy, like, hey, we're earthy people. I don't mean like that, or like, hey, we eat organic. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about earthy, unspiritual, and then he says demonic. So earthy, very animalistic things of the earth, meaning focused just on the non-spiritual, right? And then, he uses that term unspiritual to help bring it home. And then the idea of demonic, the idea of something that is not of God, but it's of another source. It's of another kind. So when we're wrapped up in bitter jealousies, selfish ambitions, our own way of doing things, right? We're not tapped into the tree of Christ. We're tapped into something different, something of a different source, right? An earthly source, an unspiritual source. We're plugging into something that's from a demonic background. It's got something that, when I think of demonic, I think of something that is really opposing to God, something that is very contrary, to the Lord. When I think of how James kind of is flowing with this idea of demonic, I'm not thinking of like so much scary monster demonic, that we see maybe in a movie, but I think of the idea of something that, is kind of like, it seems like it's right, but really it's coming from a different source. It's really wrong. And but it's so filled with pride and something, it's so masked that it's manipulative. And I think of that as that origin of demonic, that manipulation, that slandering, that deceiving of the devil, that's there. Demonic, it's got a real twist to it. And whenever we're not acting in that honesty, right? Whenever we're tied up in jealousies and selfish ambitions and all those inner things that are in our life, we're not tapped into the tree of Christ, right? Planted by the rivers of water, kind of Psalm 1, tapped into that source. But now we're tapped into a different source, and we're going to go in different ways. So, Tamra, I do 24/7 care of stepmother since my dad passed away. Very narcissistic, hard at times to respond when she talks bad about my dad and our family. Yeah, pray for your tongue. Yes, we will. And that's a good on. Sometimes there's those times like we talked about with the family that can be the most difficult. So, absolutely. And we'll be praying for that situation. Yeah, absolutely. And I know, hey, our brother, I saw Jesus was on there too, and Casey, praying too. So we got some people praying there in the chat. So let's finish up this little section right here. It says, "For where there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind." So when you see jealousy, oh, I could do better. Oh, I wish I was that. Oh, God, all that kind of stuff. Jealous of someone. Why am I not doing that? Why do they get that? Selfish ambition, right? Wanting just to please yourself. Very narcissistic in your attitudes, right? Never thinking of other people. It says you will find disorder and evil of every kind. So if I want peace in my life, I have to be able to work on my jealousies and my selfish ambitions, my discontentments, my resentments, my anger, and knowing that the humility, there's a humility that comes from wisdom as I grow in my understanding of God. And I understand that I need God. I walk humbly now. I don't think of myself more highly than I need to think of. It says, "But the wisdom from above is first of all pure." So the wisdom that is from above is first of all pure. It's the idea of not being contaminated, right? It's something that is pure, like pure living water. It says it is also peace-loving. So it's not filled with this ambition, this selfish ambition or this bitter jealousy, but it's actually peace-loving. It's looking at other people and having a loving heart towards them, a peaceful heart towards them. It says gentle at all times. Wow. So this is what it looks like, I guess, to have a wisdom that is first of all pure. So when you think of like water, you think of that pure water. Well, this is what it looks like. It's this pure water, this pure wisdom is peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. And I love that. Willing to yield. Am I willing to come underneath? Am I willing to surrender? Am I willing to submit? Am I willing not to be the judge? Am I willing to be judged? Am I willing to yield to God? Am I willing to put myself under? To yield my body, to yield my mind, to yield my tongue over to God's ways? Or do I want to sit in the judgment where now I am the judge, but of course with my tainted mind I become bitter, jealous, and full of selfish ambition, and I judge other people, and I become harsh. Anybody who speaks up, I tend to tear them down, and that kind of thing. And so am I willing to yield? And I like that. That's something I feel like that's an active term this morning, to yield myself to God. I want to put myself under Him, really mentally get that right in my mind. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. Full of mercy. Am I full of mercy? Blessed are the pure, right? Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the merciful. Do you see all the Beatitudes once again flowing out of James in this book, right? So read Matthew chapter 5, and then you go into, again, the book of James, and you'll see all of what he's talking about comes from Jesus. And full of good mercy. Am I merciful? Am I bearing good fruit? Fruit. And what tree, again, am I plugged into? And it says, it shows no favoritism. So it's full of mercy, shows no favoritism one over another. It is always sincere. It always is. It's without manipulation. When you think of sincere, to not get into a big Bible study of the word sincere, but think of the idea as really with integrity. It's always with integrity. Now there's things in here that all of us look at and go, wow, there's things I could work on, isn't there? And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. Yes, so blessed are the peacemakers, right? And he repeats that again. So he really contrasts our earthly nature and then the heavenly nature something that is seen from Jesus, the heavenly nature, and then ourselves, the earthly nature. And it's very contrasted in this chapter. Um, and we all want to be people that are treading lightly with one another because we all stumble in many ways. We all make mistakes. And he shows it by just the lack of ability to even tame the most smallest members of our body. And then he talks about really pursuing the right kind of wisdom, the wisdom that is from above, and that when we do, it actually is producing in us a humility to really look at ourselves in a fearlessly honest way. And, and that can be tough because then we do see a lot of the holes that are within us as human beings. But as we yield ourselves, take ourselves, and as we yield ourselves over to God, we find that, man, we start getting plugged into a tree that produces in us all these cool things as he starts healing our hearts and working on things in our life. And we're able to come to him safely, knowing that he's going to take our hearts that are broken and areas in our life that are broken, and he'll mend those, that we can take it to him. So very good chapter, a very sobering chapter, as the book of James is just that. So, hey, we're going to be praying for some of you guys in the chat room. We see that there's a lot of prayer, or I'm praying. So really stoked that everybody's praying for each other. And we'll see what we start on. Where are we going to go next after this book? It looks like, man, we're almost tied up, man. We're 60-40 right now, the book of John. So we will see. We only got 2 more chapters left of this book, and then we'll be done. So, hey, read the chapter again, bring it before the Lord, and you guys have a great day, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.